Night settles over the broken rings of the Colosseum like a shawl, and Rome breathes around it with quieter lungs. Stones hold warmth from the day and release it slowly, as if whispering names you cannot quite hear. People call this place haunted, and even with soft lights and steady footsteps, you might feel it too. Is it because the arena once flooded for miniature sea battles, or because of a story that martyrs died here in great numbers, or because a thumb tilted one way or the other sealed a stranger's fate? We will move through those questions calmly, with gentle care for what is certain and what is only echo. We will step into corridors beneath the floor where machines once rose, look up to where awnings made shade like moving clouds, and pause for the plants that sprout from the walls like distant visitors. Keep your breathing easy. In a moment, we'll begin to separate scare from history, and notice how the truth can feel even more mysterious than the legend. Let the night settle softly on the great oval, like a slow breath laid over stone. Streetlights from the modern city float at a distance, and the Colosseum glows from within like a lantern that forgot its story but still remembers the light. The air is cooler here, touched by old shade that lingers after dusk. You stand where the ground falls inward in a gentle bowl, and every footstep seems to bring another step back, a patient echo following you like a quiet dog. People call the place haunted, and in low light it is easy to understand why. Sound does not leave at once, it curls around and returns. In a moment, we will listen closely to that curl and see how the building itself teaches sound to stay. The shape is simple to say and complicated to feel. It is an ellipse-like, a circle that someone has held gently by two sides and stretched a little. That curve lets tiers of seats face the center without sharp corners. So voices rising from the arena floor meet stone that gently returns them to the ears above. The seats once were marble and then other stones as centuries changed them, and stone is a good listener and a better repeater. Even now, with gaps and grass, the walls feed back small noises with calm persistence. In a moment, we will walk toward one of the wide arches to know why the air here moves, as if the building were breathing. Those high arches are not just for looking grand. They let wind pass through in polite streams. During the day, warm air rises and slides out through upper rings. At night, cool air drops and moves along the corridors. The movement is slow and even, which makes tiny sounds, footsteps, a whisper, the click of a ring on a rail stretch out as if the building were thinking them over. Along the lower passages, the stone is pocked with many small holes where metal clamps were pried out long after the arena's busiest years, and night shadows sit in those holes like soft eyes. You do not need ghosts for a watchful feeling. Architecture supplies it. In a moment, we will step where crowds once flowed and feel how the plan-directed bodies like water dot the Colosseum is a ring of rings, with corridors that circle and corridors that run like spokes from rim to center. Roman planners made it so. Tens of thousands could enter and leave without pressing into danger. Doorways opened from these corridors into the wedges of seats, and the exits later, nicknamed with a word that gave movies an idea, let people spill out quickly. A design meant to calm crowds has a side effect in darkness. It makes long tubes of echo. If you clap your hands where two corridors cross, the sound finds two paths and returns as if someone were clapping back. This hardly needs a legend to feel uncanny. In a moment, we will look down instead of around, because part of the haunted feeling rises from what is beneath your feet. Under the arena floor there is a web of chambers and passages built after the first seasons. The world that once moved with ropes in hands. From above, you see it now as a grid of walls with dark mouths leading deeper. Once, the floor lay over this like skin over muscle. At night, the openings act like small throats that swallow sound and then give it back in a lower voice. The modern mind calls them basements. An older mind might call them underworlds. Either way, you feel that there is more of the building than meets the eye, and that more is what stories lean on. In a moment, we will place one hand on the outer wall, and notice what kind of stone we are touching. The outer frame is tough stone from near Rome, pale and quiet under moonlight. Inside the skin, the Romans used layers blocks set with care. Lighter stone where weight allowed, and a kind of ancient concrete that shaped the arches and vaults. These vaults hold the air the way a shell holds the sound of the sea. They gather and remake it, A cough becomes a soft drum. A heel strike turns to a heartbeat that seems to belong to the place, not to you. In a moment, we will stand still and listen for the small life that shares the arena when tours are gone. Birds sleep in the high cutouts, and wake with a soft ruffle when a breeze changes. A bat may write its own quick line across the open center, and vanish before you finish a breath. Plants find purchase between stones, and in spring even a few blooms visit, like quiet flags from distant fields. In the past 2 centuries, people have counted surprising species here. A botany story that explains itself better when you learn how soil and seeds traveled with animals and goods across an empire. Even if you do not know that tale yet, you feel the garden's stubbornness. Living things keep making homes in the cracks of history, and that too can feel like a presence. In a moment, we will look up instead of down and think about the sky that once could be tamed. In the daytime of long ago, the Romans pulled a great awning over parts of the seating, a sea of cloth handled by sailors who knew ropes and wind. At night you only see the anchors for that system, and imagine the shade rippling like a cloud. The idea that the sky itself could be commanded adds to the sense that the building is alive. It is not hard to picture the cloth whispering, the ropes humming, each sound kept and repeated by stone. Add the soft scent of dust and warm lime from the day, and the place feels like a sleeping animal that breathes through your memories. In a moment, we will ask why such feelings gather here more than at other ruins in the same city. Part of the answer is simple: size. This is a public room for a city, larger than any house, and emptiness of this volume at night makes your senses search for company. Part is the clarity of the plan. You understand at a glance that many eyes once watched the same center, which makes your own eyes expect a show and feel strange when no show comes. Part is the long use after the first purpose faded. People lived in arches, prayed in chapels, worked with stone so that many times lie on top of each other, like sheets in a chest, still faintly warm. A place that has held this much attention keeps a trace of it, the way a book holds a reader's thumbprint. In a moment, we will touch gently on fear, because fear is the simplest spice people add to silence. When a story says a place is haunted, listeners bring fear with them and hear it answered. A distant motorbike becomes a moan in the outer ring. A guard's cough turns into a reply from beneath. A street dog's bark is the voice of someone unnamed. The building is a fine instrument for such transformations because of its echo, its arches, its underways. But the feeling does not need to be fearful to be strong. You can choose to hear the echoes as memory instead of menace, and the night gives you space to make that choice. In a moment, we will set one honest question in the center of the floor. Who built this? And what did their days look like? We return to the breath of the stones and the presence you sensed at first step. The haunted mood is not only legend, it is acoustics and air, nightbirds and small plants, holes where iron once tied stone to stone, and the hint of rooms below. It is a theater that remembers audiences, and a machine that remembers being turned on. You might feel a little shiver and still be at peace, the way a quiet museum can be peaceful even when it holds heavy stories. The Colosseum at night is a teacher with a low voice. In a moment, we will take up the question many visitors whisper first: was this built by slaves alone? Or was it made by many hands under contract? And we will answer with care, because the truth of labor here is one of the place's most human shadows. Stay with the quiet we found a moment ago. The stone still breathes cool air, and your footsteps still find echoes waiting to come home. We asked a simple, heavy question: who built this? When people whisper that it was slaves alone, they are reaching for a clean story that fits in a single line. The truth is slower and larger. A building this size is a chain of many kinds of hands. Some were captive, some were free, some owned their tools and their day, some did not. The emperor who ordered the work did not lift the blocks. He set money and orders moving. In a moment, we will follow that money from a battlefield to a quarry, and then back to these arches. Many historians think the project began with spoils from war. An inscription once told the crowd that the amphitheater was made from spoils, a proud line that linked public joy to victory far away. The new dynasty wanted to wash away the memory of a hated palace and its private lake, so they dried the lake and raised a public arena in its place. That story is not a ghost tale. It is politics written in stone. Money buys stone and lime and iron. Money hires crews. Money feeds the city, while wagons and barges carry blocks from nearby hills. In a moment, we will visit those hills and watch stone wake from sleep. The bright outer skin came from quarries not far from Rome, where pale stone fractures in large, well-behaved blocks. Quarrymen, some free, some not, cut lines with metal tools, drove wedges, and teased giants from bedrock with patience, not only force. Teams rolled blocks onto sleds, dragged them to river landings, and loaded them onto barges that knew the Tiber's rhythm. That is one whole economy already, running before a single arch rose here. The work did not look like a line of chained men in rags. It looked like carts, cranes, and crews who had done this their whole lives. In a moment, we will return to the city and walk onto the building site, where planning mattered as much as muscle. A site like this one is a beehive without buzz. Surveyors set out the ellipse with ropes and stakes. Foremen assigned crews to foundations, 2 vaults, 2 staircases that would split the crowd and keep them safe. Engineers decided where the concrete could carry the load and where solid stone should stand. Skilled masons set courses so tight a blade would envy the joint. Other hands mixed lime and sand into mortar. Others brought water in a human chain. There were cranes worked by men walking inside big wooden wheels, lifting blocks with a steady pace that felt like a slow drum. Captive labor could pull a rope. Only trained hands could set an arch. Both were used. In a moment, we will meet the people who paid and the people who were paid. Because that line tells another part of the story. Public works in Rome often ran through contractors. A state official oversaw the whole, but the daily jobs went to firms that promised a piece of the work for a set price. Those firms then hired brickmakers, stonecutters, plasterers, carpenters, metalworkers. We find their names stamped on bricks. From the same era in other buildings, quiet little claims left in the clay before firing. Wages passed from clerk to crew. A skilled mason could feed a family. A foreman could train a son. A brickmaker's stamp was a small advertisement for his kill. Alongside these free workers, war captives likely carried stones and cleared rubble, hard jobs that needed strength more than training. The mix does not erase the pain of those forced to labor. It adds people who chose this work because they knew it well. In a moment, we will touch the myth that says one conquered people alone built the whole arena, and we will soften its edges. After a brutal war, captives were brought to Rome. Some were sold, some were kept for public projects, some were scattered to private households, some, over time, could be freed. Popular retellings often take one path from that tangle and draw it thick. They built the Colosseum. It is possible that groups of those captives were used, here moving material, preparing ground, hauling water, turning the wheels that raised blocks. But the building's precision points to a trained corps, Roman engineers who knew the cities, soil, Italian and provincial artisans whose guilds had long histories, teams used to arches and staircases, stories made later, like clean lines. The site itself shows many lines crossing. In a moment, we will look at materials that betray the rhythm of crews, who were paid for skill rather than pushed for speed. If you look closely at the inner walls, you can see layers. A tough outer ring of cut stone ties into arches made of concrete poured inside wooden forms. Brick-faced concrete climbs in careful bands. Lighter stone appears where the load is lower. This is design, not accident. It means someone weighed, measured, and saved. It means a supply chain delivered not only the heavy showstone, but also brick by the thousands, mortar in enormous quantities, iron clamps set in place and then later robbed out when the city needed metal again. A building that stands this long is a ledger made of rock. Each line says a team showed up, did their part, and left their mark under other marks. In a moment, we will listen for the sound of orders, because the same corridors that carry echo to night once carried instruction by day. Work crews were divided by task and by level of the building. You can picture short, firm orders moving through. The same arch as we walked, more lime, check the centering, wheel ready. Overseers used wax tablets to track hours and materials. Runners moved messages from one ring to another. The emperor's agents visited to be seen, but everyday decisions belonged to the site bosses who knew which vault could be stripped of its wooden support on Thursday, and which had to wait until Sunday. It is likely that rewards and penalties kept pace with deadlines. Ancient writers enjoyed complaining about delay and cost as much as modern ones do. The difference is that no one wrote the names of the ordinary workers on the facade. They wrote the names of the emperors. In a moment, we will bring those emperors into the frame, because their timeline shaped the pace. The first phase rose under a ruler who wanted to show a kinder face after a troubled reign. The opening ceremonies belonged to his son, who needed a bright start. Finishing touches and deeper chambers were added under a brother who pushed for more spectacle. Such changes explain why the understage world came later and why the building reads like one project with chapters. Politics sets the schedule. Engineers make the schedule real. Workers free and unfree fill the days between. If you feel a human pulse in these stones at night, it is the rhythm of those layered efforts, not the single beat of one kind of labor. In a moment, we will walk back to the outer ring and notice the joints where blocks meet, because those joints tell a gentler truth about who set them. Edges fit the way hands fit when both are trying. A well-cut block can be placed by anyone strong enough to lift, but it cannot be made by anyone. The chisels leave signatures, long and short, straight and curved. The arch rings over the main entrances show a quiet pride in proportion that comes from eyes trained by practice, not by fear. If the arena had been built only by terrified captives under the whip, it would not look like this after so many winters. Fear can move stone. It cannot plan drainage. And drainage is good here, channels under seats, slopes measured with care, runnels that kept rain from turning stairs into streams. In a moment, we will let a modern picture help us hold this without losing the calm we've earned. Think of a stadium today. A city votes funds, a company wins the bid, subcontractors swarm. Some tasks are brute, some are delicate. You might meet a crane operator who loves the view, a mason who speaks about joints like a poet, a laborer who carries buckets and saves to put his daughter in school. The name on the ribbon belongs to a politician. The work belongs to thousands. Now take away the hard hat and give someone a tunic. The rhythm stays. In a moment, we will return to the night air and to the way this mix of labor feeds the haunted feeling, not with horror, but with weight, knowing that free and unfree hands worked together here does not make the place less heavy. It makes it more human. You can imagine conversations during a pause, a drink of water shared, a joke about the way the dust clings to every fold. You can imagine a boy learning to hold a chisel the way his father did, even if his father was owned and he was too. You can imagine a contractor counting bricks in the shade of an arch and planning how to stretch his pay. Memory holds more than fear. It holds effort. That is a different kind of presence. In a moment, we will step onto the sand of the arena and look at the day-to-day of shows, because myths of endless slaughter also simplify a complex machine. The question of labor returns to a point we set early. Simple stories grow because the building asks for them. Slaves built it is one sentence. A mixed workforce under a public project with private contracts is a paragraph. But the paragraph is kinder to the truth, and the truth makes the night easier to stand in. You can feel respect for the skill, without denying the pain where it existed. The Colosseum holds both, the same way it holds echo and silence. Now let's go down toward the center, where sand once swallowed footsteps and kept the surface clean. In a moment, we will brush that sand with a palm and talk about why it was there, how long a program lasted, who cleaned between shows, and why the crowd's day was as carefully managed as the building's first day with scaffolds. Step gently onto the floor that is no longer a floor. Where you stand now is open to the sky. But in its day, a wooden deck stretched across this space like a calm sea, and above that deck lay sand. The Latin word for sand, a teacher once liked to say, is the cousin of the word that gives the building its modern nickname. Sand was not decoration. It was a tool. It softened footsteps, settled dust, and hid the messy look of life in motion. It made the surface safe enough to sprint and firm enough to plant a heel. In a moment, we will brush that sand with our thoughts and see how it shaped the rhythm of a show. Sand does a quiet, important job. It drinks sweat, and it drinks the small spills that come with any active spectacle, so the surface stays usable. Crews raked it between acts to even it out and to erase what the last scene left behind. If a sponsor wanted elegance, fresh sand might be spread for an afternoon program the way a clean tablecloth is laid for a second sitting. Some writers hint that fine-colored sands were prized in special contexts. Whether that sparkle reached this arena often is uncertain, but the wish tells you how conscious the planners were of the floor's look. In a moment, we will widen our view from the surface to the schedule, because the day did not arrive as one blur. It arrived in carefully stacked parts. A typical program followed a gentle arc that many historians think became tradition. Early hours belonged to staged hunts, with trained professionals working with animals and props in ways that looked wild to the upper seats and very controlled to the keepers below. Midday could turn more serious when the legal system made sharp examples in public. The tone here is hard to narrate, so we will only note that such scenes existed and that not every crowd found them entertaining. Afternoon belonged to pairings. With weapons, the portion most modern minds label with a single word, even though the rules, gear, and outcomes varied more than movies show. This structure created the illusion of endlessness. A morning of movement, a heavy noon, a drawn-out afternoon, each part with breaks to reset. In a moment, we will step into one of those resets and watch the cleaners and keepers at work. Reset. Crews moved like stagehands between scenes. You would have seen men with wide rakes smoothing the surface, others checking the edges where barriers met the floor, and handlers calming animals in pens below while a gate opened or a trap lifted. Water carriers walked the perimeter to splash the sand lightly in dusty weather. It kept grit low and made the next act read clearly from the cheap seats. Some sources describe attendants who sprinkled perfumes or saffron water in great festivals to make heat more bearable. If that happened here, it was likely occasional, tied to a rich sponsor's pride. Even without such flourishes, there was always motion under the calm. Doors tested, ropes eased, signals exchanged. In a moment, we will sit for a breath in the seats and notice the crowd's day, because management up there shaped what felt like fate down here. The building itself kept order like a kindly machine. People entered by class and ticketed through specific arches, climbed stairs that split them neatly, and found places marked by status closest seats for the most honored, highest benches for those who arrived with patience and a view. Ushers stood at key points to keep aisles clear so breaks did not become crush. Sellers walked the corridors with water and small snacks, because a hungry audience is a restless one. Sailors who worked the shade awnings watched the sky and obeyed signals so cloth did not flap into chaos. All this quiet control helped the pageant feel smooth and inevitable. In a moment, we will look back to the floor and see how cost kept. Choices from turning wild. Spectacles were expensive in a way that makes modern budgets nod. Animals had to be captured, fed, trained, and kept calm in a new climate. Weapon specialists had to be housed and rehearsed. Musicians, painters, stage carpenters, and the men who built temporary scenery all drew pay. A careless injury to the wrong performer was not only a tragedy, it was a lost investment. Mercy too had costs and rewards. Sparing a skilled fighter could please a crowd that wanted to see him again and gratify a sponsor who enjoyed being called generous. The image of a single thumb deciding a life is strong in modern minds, but real decisions leaned on money, mood, and rule. In a moment, we will slide under the floor in our thoughts, because the smoothness above relied on a hidden machine below. Beneath the deck, the hypogeum was a backstage city. Corridors led to pens, winches, and lifts, and crewmen read a system of marks and calls that told them when to send an animal up or when to slide a piece of scenery into place. Trapdoors opened like hard blinks and closed just as fast. If you imagine this at night, you can feel why people sense presences here. Dark mouths, old air, the memory of timed appearances. The men below probably wore simple marks of rank and carried hooks and poles, not weapons of show. Their work was to keep wonder on time and to keep danger in a box until the right beat. In a moment, we will come back to the upper air and address the idea that the arena became a lake. The tale of true naval battles inside this space is romantic and stubborn. To flood an arena of this size, hold the water, build boat-sized lifts, and then drain fast enough to make afternoon programs You need a plumbing miracle and a floor that loves to be drowned. Early, simpler shows in other places may have staged small boat scenes, and some scholars think very early events here tried shallow water spectacles before the underfloor chambers were built. Once this underground city existed, soaking it regularly would have ruined the system that made the rest of the show work. What you can hold is a picture of partial staging rafts, painted sets, clever illusions, rather than deep water, with real rams and rowing crews. In a moment, we will turn gently to the other picture that haunts popular imagination and see why it grew. Writers of later centuries loved to speak about rivers of blood, as if the sand could never dry. Ancient authors also used big numbers to honor emperors or to scold them. A few days could swell into months, a dozen animals into hundreds, an unusual cruelty into a constant. Crowds might remember that they stayed in their seats from dawn to dusk, and tell it as one long, crimson blur. In reality, crews raked, sprinkled, and reset over and over, making the same stage clean for the next act. Cleaning was part of the choreography. It broke time into chunks. The legend of endless horror simplifies that rhythm into one mood. In a moment, we will soften the edges even more by introducing the people in the pairs. Paired fighters trained in schools with rules. They learned moves, faults, and signals, the way dancers learn steps. Some were volunteers seeking pay and fame. Some were not free to choose. Many were a complicated mix of pride and necessity. Armor types met complementary armor types, net against sword, big shield against quick blade, not to produce random chaos, but to produce a story with recognizable beats. Outcomes could be harsh, but the show itself leaned on skill, not frenzy. That is why the same names appear in inscriptions in multiple places. People wanted their favorites to return. In a moment, we will return to the sand's soft voice, because it is the thread that ties all of this together. Sand ends the day the way it started it, as kindness and cover. It receives the last steps, hides the last marks, and lies still, while crews pull up the wooden decking to make repairs, or to check trapdoors for splinters. It is a quiet partner, like the low light of evening in a home where the table has been cleared and the floor swept. The next morning, the first rakes leave their lines, and the fresh surface tells the crowd that today will begin clean. That repeat helped crowds feel safe enough to return, and helped later storytellers compress many programs into a single long memory. In a moment, we will climb back under the deck and stay there, because the underground machine is one of the building's strangest secrets, and walking calmly through it explains much of the haunted feeling we brought with us from the start. Step down with your mind where your feet cannot go tonight. The floor you imagined a moment ago, that calm skin of wood and sand, once hid a second world. This lower world was not built at the very start. It grew after the first seasons, when planners wanted more surprise, more timing, more wonder. You see it now as rows of stone walls with dark mouths, but think of it then as a backstage with a roof. The air would have been warm and close, scented with oil for lamps, with hay for animals, with damp from washwater. Above, the crowd watched a clean show. Below, men measured seconds by touch. In a moment, we will learn how those seconds rose, as if by magic. Along the outer ring of the arena floor, archaeologists have found shafts where lifts once lived. Each shaft held a wooden tower, a strong cage, and a set of ropes that ran up to the level of the floor, and then away to winches. A lift like this did not fly, it climbed carefully. Teams turned capstans, big wooden wheels that men walked inside or pulled on levers, and the cage rose until it kissed the trapdoor above. A handler calmed the beast or the actor inside the cage at the last breath. Then a latch clicked, the door snapped open, and the show gained a sudden tiger, a deer, a tree, or a small stage house. The crowd gasped. Below, the crew wiped hands and reset ropes for the next cue. In a moment, we will come closer to those trapdoors, because they explain why the place still feels alert even when empty. The trapdoors were lids set flush with the floor, some small for animals, some larger for scenery. They opened upward on quick hinges or slid aside on guides greased with tallow. You can still see slots and sockets in the stone where the frame of these doors sat, and where stops kept them from over. Imagine standing under one with a rope in your palm. You feel the tremble of steps above. You hear the oarmaster's modern cousin, the stage boss counting down, you smell oil. And then your whole world becomes the weight of a door for the half-breath that matters. When visitors peer down at those mouths today, their eyes do the same work your hands once did. They wait. Waiting makes a place feel alive. In a moment, we will walk the passages that brought animals to those lifts. Animal pens lined certain corridors, broken by gates like short portcullises. Keepers knew the temper of each creature, which doors to open first, which scents to mask with straw, which corners needed canvas screens so nervous eyes would not panic at torchlight. It is likely that keepers used covered chutes to bring animals close without letting them see the arena until the cage enclosed them, because a calm entrance costs less than a wild struggle. Water troughs stood against the wall where a dark stain still tells a story. Scratch marks on stone at low height, whisper of hooves or claws testing the edge. If you stand quietly now, you can almost hear a chain ring once, then fall still. In a moment, we will set a hand on the winch posts, because power down here was human, timed to the breath above. Power came from men in teams, legs steady inside, wheel cranes, hands steady on winch bars, backs set against uprights that took thrust. The ropes rode over wooden pulleys that doubled or tripled the force, and the pulleys hung from beams set into sockets you can still find like empty eyes. The rope itself was a craft, twisted fibers laid to suit pull and wear, rubbed with fat, where it ran over wood, coiled with care when idle, so that no tangle would steal a cue. A good crew at a good wheel moved like rowers, step, 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 the same pace that keeps a song in time. If a cue slipped, a handler could stall the lift, a hand's width without spoiling the illusion. Control, not speed, made magic. In a moment, we will add light to the picture, because lamps made both sight and shadow down here. Dot light came from clay lamps and from torches held where smoke could escape through planned vents. The lamps cast small halos on stone and left the corners depthless. That kind of light invites the mind to finish the picture. And perhaps this is why people today feel watched when they look down into the hypogeum. The eye expects faces at the edge of the glow. Safety asked for rules. Torches away from hay. Oil jars stoppered tight. Spare cloth kept damp to smother a spark. Men knew where to stand to let heat climb out, and where to duck when a lift passed. The air would have pulsed with soft orders and the clink of metal on wood, not with screams. The chill you feel now is simply the memory of many breaths in a small place. In a moment, we will follow a cue from start to finish, so you can feel the rhythm that rose to the sand. Say the program calls for a deer to appear near a painted grove. Above, the audience hears a flute. Below, the pen gate creaks. The deer steps into a narrow chute. A handler touches its flank with a calm palm. The cage door slides. The animal enters, and someone hums to steady his own hands. Ready, a voice says in low tone. The winch team begins to walk. The rope tightens. The cage rises inside its shaft like bread, lifting in a warm oven. At the last finger's width, a latch catches. The trapdoor pops, and sun meets the animal's eyes. The deer springs. The handler breaths out and grins without pride. And the team immediately lowers the empty cage for the next surprise. Nothing supernatural there, only practiced kindness under practical pressure. In a moment, we will lift something heavier and watch how counterweight and care make even rough forces gentle. For larger set pieces, a tree, a column, a false rock, the crew tied loads to frames with many lines. They added sacks of sand as counterweights where the shaft allowed, so the lift was a balance, not a dead haul. Counterweights are the old friend of theater. Slow to lift, slow to fall, easy to hold, mid-stroke. You can often tell a shaft that hosted such work by where marks at a certain height, where a frame slid and paused often. The point is not that the Romans had a modern stage grid. It is that they loved solutions that traded sudden strength for steady control. That love is why the hypogeum lasted. In a moment, we will step toward sound again, because noise management below mattered as much as noise-making above. Sound could spoil illusion. A clatter before a reveal turned surprise into farce. So crews padded hard corners with leather, wrapped iron hooks in cloth, and chose feet in soft shoes over boots on days when timing was delicate. There would have been a language of Noxtree for ready, one for stop sent through wood, where voices might carry up. Animal calls were masked, with music at the right moment. The flute above, or a drum beat inside the parade, covered a brief anxiety below. If you listen now, you hear only tourists during the day and wind at night. Add in your head the soft thud of a wheel, the tap of a signal, and the sudden quiet that means go. In a moment, we will rest a hand on the drains, because water has a habit of finding trouble in any underworld. The hypogeum was laced with channels for rain and wash water. The deck above had seams that shed liquids toward edges, and at those edges, slots took runoff down into gutters that led to a main drain. After a heavy program, crews raked the sand, lifted sections of deck, and washed stains into these channels, so the smell did not rise to the seats next morning. Stagnant water would have ruined wood and fouled air. The very presence of these drains tells you the machine below was built to last more than a festival. If you are thinking about the legend of flooding, you can see why many historians hesitate. Regular soaking of this layered space would turn order into rot. In a moment, we will touch that legend with a gentle hand and use what we have learned. Here to measure it, people love the image of a lake inside these walls. Earlier, simpler arenas may have staged shallow water tricks, and some think very early days here tried similar shows when the underfloor was not yet carved like a honeycomb. But once the hypogeum stood, the logic points away from deep water. Too many shafts, too many timbers, too many places for pressure to pry and for damp to bite. Controlled floods in small basins, staged rafts, and scenic illusions are easier to square with the drains under your fingers and the lifts at your shoulder. The underworld that made surprise reliable is the same underworld that makes the big water story unlikely. In a moment, we will return to the people who lived inside this grid, because they left no names on the stone, and yet the stone remembers their patterns. Down here worked keepers, carpenters, ropemen, wheelwalkers, latch handlers, and a chief, who kept the cues in his head like a score. Some may have been free and proud of their craft. Others may have been bound and proud of their steadiness. Many likely belonged to the mixed world in between, earning day wages and permanent calices. Their pride would be in a show that rose on time, and in the rare moment when a risk was smoothed, before it showed. Imagine the small cheers that only they heard, a nod from one to another after a difficult sequence. The way cooks in a busy kitchen smile when a hard service ends clean. That feeling lives in the stone more softly than fear, and may be what your skin calls presence at the railing today. In a moment, we will trace how this machine changed the mood above, because engineering shaped emotion as much as the two hands of a fighter did. Surprise creates awe. When a gate opened with no visible hand behind it, when a grove appeared where there had been none, when a beast rose as if the earth itself were giving it up. The crowd felt a tingle that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with timing. Sponsors bought that feeling too by loyalty. Engineers sold it with pulleys and patience. The result was a theater that could tilt the city's mood for a day, and a memory that tilted centuries of stories afterward. This is one of the dark secrets worth keeping in the light. That wonder was made by quiet labor in half-dark rooms. In a moment, we will consider how this half-dark makes modern minds whisper-haunted, and why the whisper stays even. When you know the ropes dot in the present, fragments of the hypogeum stand like ribs. Moonlight settles in the shafts. A tour guide's voice rides down a stair and loses its words. The mind, greedy for actors, furnishes them. Handlers at posts, animals waiting, a ladder, someone forgot to move. You do not need a spirit to feel company here. You need only remember that work filled this space as thick as breath. Knowing the machinery makes the feeling kinder, not smaller. You can stand longer without bracing against dread. The dark is just a quiet workshop that retired. In a moment, we will climb up again, let air widen, and turn to the pool that legend pours into the center, water, and ask, calmly, how much of that legend can stand on these drains and timbers? And how much is reflection? Let the night hold us on the rim of the arena a little longer. We have peered into the underworld of lifts and trapdoors. We have felt how timber and rope turned surprise into a calm craft. Now the water story asks for its turn. People love to say the Colosseum once flooded like a bowl and boats fought here, as if the city had poured a small sea into its lap. The image is strong and glittering, like a coin that throws back more light than it should. We will handle it gently. We will test it against the stone, the drains we touched, and the sense we have built about how the machine below actually worked. In a moment, we will stand quietly at the edge and imagine what true flooding would ask to flood this space deeply, enough for real rowing. You would need walls that accept pressure like a dam, a floor that holds water instead of hiding shafts, and a way to bring a river's worth of water in and then out without turning the lower rooms into a swamp. Stone can carry weight, yes, but water asks for other kinds of strength. It finds every gap. It presses on every seam. The arena had seams by design: trapdoors, lift shafts, vent slots, drains to remove rinse water after shows. The hypogeum we explored is a honeycomb that loves dryness. It is hard to picture that honeycomb living well under a lake. In a moment, we will add history to the picture, because stories began early and travel fast. Some ancient writers hint that the first celebrations for this arena included watery scenes. The city itself had a habit of staging mock sea fights, called by a name that means ship battle, but those were known to happen in special basins built for the task, or in depressions that could be flooded with care and drained into major sewers. One emperor cut a wide channel near the river just for such shows. Another used a lake created by an earlier ruler to impress the crowds. It is possible that in the very first days, before the full underfloor was carved, shallow water displays were tried here, something brief and clever, more pageant than battle. Many historians think so, but once the lower machinery arrived, wetness as a main act would have risked the whole system. In a moment, we will listen to what the stone itself says about water. You saw drains along the edges and channels cut to lead wash water away. You did not see sluice gates robust enough to open and close under the weight of a small pond. You did not see waterproof plaster lining a basin from wall to wall, the way bathhouses used a special mix to keep water honest. You saw sockets for beams and grooves for doors. You saw the little marks of rope and wheel, not the big marks of flood. The Colosseum could handle splashing, rinsing, and the light damp that keeps dust down. It was not a public bath in disguise. In a moment, we will let our eyes draw a gentler water picture, because spectacle speaks many dialects. Imagine instead a shallow pool shaped like a crescent at one end, built on top of the floor with temporary walls, perhaps only ankle or knee deep. Imagine blue-painted canvas around the curve, painted backdrops of harbor towers, a frame that suggested the bow of a ship rising on a lift, oars that dipped into water just enough to make rings that glowed in the sun. Add music, shouts, and actors costumed as sailors. 2 people in the high seats. The scene reads as a sea. To the stagehands, it reads as a set change with towels. Such partial stagings are easier to square with the drains we traced and the traps we met. In a moment, we will bring in the city's plumbing, because even illusion needs a source and a sink. Rome could move water. Aqueducts strode over valleys to feed fountains, baths, and households. The great sewer that ran through the forum took rain and runoff to the river. If you needed to fill a shallow basin in the arena, a pipe could be brought to do the job. If you needed to empty it, the same drains that took rinse water could carry it away slowly, gently, under supervision of men who knew how to keep debris from choking the channels. This is not the heroism of an inland sea. It is the craft of a theater that liked to change mood on time. In a moment, we will step outside the Colosseum in our minds and look at the places where true boat shows are. Sure, beyond the oval, near the river's bend, emperors built purpose-made basins where full-size boat fights could happen without asking a wooden stage to behave like a stone harbor. Banks could be shaped to hold crowds. Depth could be controlled. When a ruler wanted to boast that the capital could host a piece of the sea, he used those places as proof. The city was big enough to keep each purpose in its proper room. That a writer later said boats fought at the amphitheater does not force water into this pit. It may simply fold several spectacles into one fine sentence. In a moment, we will touch the way later centuries liked the grand version and let it linger. Medieval storytellers and early modern tourists enjoyed the large image more than the small technical truth. It is natural. The Colosseum looks like a bowl. Bowls want soup. A guide who says they turned this into a lake feeds a hunger for amazement that a calmer line They sprinkled the floor and wheeled a ship frame through a painted harbor. Does not satisfy at once. Plays, paintings, and later books loved the lake. A rumor repeated at night under these arches feels truer than a footnote read at noon. We do not need to scold the rumor. We only need to set it beside the drains and the lifts, and see which one the stone nods to. In a moment, we will open a softer door. The door of names. The condensed word for water battle was famous. It carried the glamour of far seas and enemy fleets. A sponsor could advertise naval scenes on a festival program and deliver a clever hybrid of sound, wet light, platform, and actors. Many in the audience would go home pleased. Years later, the phrase naval scenes might grow into naval battles, and then into real ship fights. Language swells like a sail when wind fills it. We simply pull a little rope now and take some air out so the cloth shows its true size. In a moment, we will listen to the building breathe again, because the way air moves here argues calmly for dry boards and moving traps, not for tides. At night, a slow draft moves along the corridors under the seats, up through the openings, and out into the sky. If the underworld were designed to hold water often, it would be tighter, less full of mouths, more sealed. The many small holes we saw where later centuries robbed iron clamps from stone become little flutes in this breeze. The sound they make is not water's whisper. It is air learning the old paths. It is one more reason the mind says haunted. It is also one more reason the story of deep flooding here feels like sweet thunder, not steady rain. In a moment, we will remember our underfloor crew, because their routine is the best witness we have. Picture the rope men oiling pulleys, the wheel walkers counting steps, the latch handler waiting for a thumb signal. Their day does not survive well under soggy beams. Their floor hates swelling. Their ropes fear rot. If the arena had become a lake often, those men would have been rehiring every few weeks to replace ruined gear, and the program above would have had long holes while crews rebuilt. The power of the Colosseum's shows was repeatability, a morning, a noon, an afternoon, day after day during a festival. Water as accent fits this rhythm. Water as ocean fights it. In a moment, we will give the myth its due for one last line, and then set it back on the shelf. There is something lovely in the picture people carry. Moonlight on a pool, oars creaking, lanterns making small suns on painted prows. You can keep that picture as a fair maybe for special nights early in the building's life, before the hypogeum became permanent. You can keep it as a fair probably for scenes later on that used shallow basins and clever frames. You do not need to keep the heavy lake that would drown wheels and ropes. The smaller image is enough to explain why voices still tell of water here. It is easier to flood the ear than to flood the floor. In a moment, we will look at why the water story stayed glued to this place, even when other proofs exist nearby. The Colosseum became the symbol for all Roman spectacle in many minds. When a person says Rome, they picture this oval. When they try to list wonders, they put all of them here, like a child stuffing every toy into one favorite box. Ship fights, animal hunts, staged myths, ruthless punishments, political theater venues hosted these, but the box that survived best earns the credit. The result is a haunted museum of other buildings that fell. That is a kind of truth too, just not a technical one. Knowing this helps you be kind to legends without letting them run the tour. In a moment, we will stand by a broken step and let sound come back, because sound held one of our first open loops. If the arena were often a lake, echoes would be different. Water absorbs differently than sand. The curve of the lower seeding would throw back a softer, wetter sound. At night today, the echo is dry, quick, and a touch hollow. It fits the story of boards and doors, of air and dust, of the low rattle of a lifted frame. Listen, and you can hear the past make its own case. The stones do not shout no, they simply repeat this, the small, faithful music of the machine we walked. In a moment, we will carry our calm back into a much heavier story, because another legend clings to this place with love and sorrow, and deserves careful words. People speak of martyrs here. Some say great numbers died for their faith on this sand. Others say that later devotion attached the Colosseum to suffering that happened elsewhere. Because this oval is an easy stage for memory, the truth is mixed and tender. Executions did occur in Rome, and public executions did occur in arenas. Specific proof for mass martyrdoms inside this one is thin. Though prayers walked these arches in later centuries and made the space holy, by use we will treat that with care. In a moment, we will set water down and lift memory, touching it the way you touch a name carved on an old stone, with respect for both the person and the years between. Hold the cool rail for a moment and let your breathing slow. Night is kind to heavy stories because it lowers the voice. We asked about martyrs, and the oval around us is a loud symbol even when it is silent. People bring deep feeling here. They picture brave faith and hard empire meeting on this sand. The question is not small. Did many Christians die inside this amphitheater for their belief? And is that why the place feels haunted? We will answer gently. In a moment, we will look at what is firm, what is likely, and how memory can paint a single room with the colors of an entire city. Public punishment in Rome did take place in arenas. The law liked large rooms. Crowds were witnesses. A sentence carried weight because others saw it. One brutal form was to condemn someone to beasts. Other forms used the stage in different ways. Early Christian writers, writing from pain and from hope, spoke about such deaths in strong words. They named amphitheaters as places where believers refused to renounce and paid a price. But they did not always name this amphitheater. The city held more than one venue, and the habit of folding many sites into the one that survives best came later. In a moment, we will step back a short lifetime before this building opened and notice why that matters. A famous early wave of persecution happened under a ruler who died before this amphitheater was finished. He punished Christians after a great disaster, and one chronicler describes gardens and a circus used for cruel displays on that ruler's land across the river. That is a different field, a different track, and yet later visitors, standing here, let the sorrow flow into this space because this space is where the city still gathers to remember Rome. The timeline is a quiet, stubborn guide. It does not erase suffering, it helps place it. Many historians think smaller, local episodes came and went over the first centuries, some harsher, some lighter, not one single storm that lasted without break. In a moment, we will return to the floor and speak of likely instead of certain. It is likely that some Christians died in this very arena across its long use, especially when the law made a point in public. It is also likely that many executions here were not about belief at all, but about crimes as the city defined them, about prisoners of war, about runaways, about broken rules that now read differently to us. The record does not give us a clean list of names for this building alone. One early bishop, sent from a distant province to Rome for trial, is said by tradition to have met beasts here, and the story fits the era and the city. But even as written life does not pin the event to these exact stones, the city's venues blur in memory. In a moment, we will notice how devotion later gathered the blur and gave it a home. Centuries after shows ended, the oval did not fall silent. People moved into its arches. Monks prayed in small chapels fitted into its bones. Processions walked its paths and sang. In one era, a pope declared the place holy to the memory of martyrs and set up stations for meditation. He also stopped people from taking more stone away by making the building a shrine. Piety protected ruin better than law did. Later, crosses rose and fell here with the tastes of governments and the moods of reform. Then, in our own time, a tradition returned of walking and praying on a certain spring night. When thousands gather and speak in low voices about courage and suffering, the building learns new echoes. In a moment, we will hold those echoes alongside the older ones we have already met. We said earlier that the Colosseum feels haunted because it repeats, because air moves in set ways through its rings, because underfloor openings look like mouths that might speak. Add to that the echo of prayer. Add candles, carried in slow lines over many years. Add the soft scrape of shoes in processions, where people imagine those who stood firm. A place is made of its uses as much as of its stone. The holy memory laid here is newer than the shows but older than us. It helps explain why night here feels full, even if the historian inside you remains careful about numbers and names. In a moment, we will listen to why later storytellers favored this oval when they told of martyrdom. Travelers need clear images. Preachers want symbols that can be understood in a breath. this building is the one that remained large, central, and legible. Other tracks and circuses and gardens changed hands, fell, were built over, or were forgotten under streets and houses. So the suffering of many sights climbed the steps of this one and took a seat. Pain will find a stage. This stage was ready. Guidebooks simplified for readers who had a day in the city. Pilgrims simplified for hearts that wanted one place to kiss the stone and weep. The simplification is not a lie. It is a focusing lens. In a moment, we will balance the lens with a little more of the legal weather that people lived under. Persecution in early centuries was not a constant drum. It came in waves, ordered by rulers who feared disloyalty or wanted unity, or by local officials who felt pressure from crowds. At other times, quiet compromise ruled daily life, and communities simply tried to avoid notice. Law was a living thing, interpreted by men with varying temper and aim. This does not make the brave stories smaller. It makes them rarer and therefore sharper. A person who stood fast did so not in a long blizzard, but in a shifting climate, and the choice was still hard. We can hold that hard choice without painting the whole of the arena's centuries as one unbroken ritual of cruelty. In a moment, we will consider the other bodies that met their end here, because their presence also shapes the night. Gladiators died here, though less often than legend says, because skill was investment and return. Condemned criminals died here, sometimes in ways designed to be messages as much as sentences. Animals died here, brought from far provinces, part of a spectacle that taught empire by showing its reach. If you feel a chill, it may be the weight of all those different ends, layered and difficult. The building does not tell you who is who. Sand covered each story in the same way, and rake smoothed each scene for the next. That quiet sameness feels like a ghost if you call it one. Like history if you call it that. In a moment, we will find a soft image to carry, because heavy themes need a light in the pocket. Think of the building as a book left open on a table. Many people have written in its margins. The first readers wrote about shows and skill and spectacle. Later readers wrote about repentance and memory. Modern readers write about engineering and empire and tourism. Every reader leaves a thumbprint. When you run your fingers over the page tonight, you touch all the inks at once. It is not wrong to bring a prayer or to bring a question. Both are honest. It is kind to let the page speak in many voices without forcing it to shout one tale only. In a moment, we will stand again in the center and let the next question walk in with us. We return to the sound of our own breath, the faint city noise beyond, the pocket of cool at each arch. We have balanced love and ledger, devotion and document. If great numbers of Christians died specifically here, the stones keep the secret better than the sources do. If some did, the stones hold that with the same gravity as they hold every other ending. Later generations laid prayers across the whole like a cloth, and the cloth still rests here, even if the details beneath are mixed. You can hold both layers without heat. In a moment, we will step toward a lighter, famous gesture that people bring from films and postcards. The thumb, because decisions about life and death it shows are often reduced to that flick of a hand, and the truth moves more slowly and costs more than a sign. Before we climb out of this chapter, listen once more to the way the building gently resists our wish for one-sentence answers. It gives us echoes instead. Yes, some, no, not all, maybe, here, certainly, somewhere. That is the sound of the past when we ask large questions at night. The arena does not deny the haunting. It teaches us what haunts it. Engineering, crowd, law, faith, later, prayer, all are present. When we turn to the thumb, we will keep this calm method. Set the image down. Look for how the whole machine worked, and see what part a gesture truly played in a day that had chance, contracts, costs, and moods. In a moment, we will walk up a few steps, breathe the open air, and meet the editor of the games, the sponsor, the crowd, and the small signals that did less deciding than the story likes to say, but did carry meaning as clear as a whisper. Climb a few steps into cooler air, and let the oval open again. The seats, even broken, face the center like listening faces. We have just held the tender question of martyrs with care. Now a famous little sign wanders in from postcards and films. People picture a sponsor or emperor raising one thumb to save and dropping it to kill. as if a life could swing on that tiny hinge. It is a clean image. Clean images grow strong in noisy places. In a moment, we will set the picture down and look at the room it tries to command. A day here was a machine with many hands on the levers. The sponsor paid for the program and sat where all could see him. The trained refereesmen in striped tunics with long sticks kept order in the pairs. The crowd made wind with its voice, and the fighters did not come as strangers pulled at random from a hat. They trained together for weeks and knew each other's habits. Many matches ended with both men standing. One declared the better, both sent away to fight again on a kinder day. The idea that every bout asked for a life is a myth that makes drama but not sense. In a moment, we will listen for who truly decided when a head bowed and a sword paused. There was a custom word for the act of sending a fighter away, save for another time. It meant dismissal, like letting a student leave class. If the crowd wanted it, the sponsor almost always gave it, because the sponsor wanted smiles, not hisses. If the crowd was disappointed, the sponsor could play generous, granting mercy that the referees already expected, and win more applause for being soft. Only when a fighter broke rules badly, or when a mood turned dark, did the day lean toward a hard outcome. Even then, cost and future plans whispered in the sponsor's ear. In a moment, we will bring in the thumb and see what it could have meant. Inside this larger conversation, the ancient phrase people point to says turned thumb. It does not say up or down. Later writers add color, but the earliest line keeps its mystery. Some scholars think a closed fist and tucked thumb signaled mercy thumb, hidden like a sword sheathed, while a thumb stuck out hard meant steel. Others think the thumb pointing to the chest said finish, and a thumb hidden behind fingers said let go. We cannot press the past to pick one with certainty. What we can say is simple. A single, simple thumbs up to live, thumbs down to die is likely a late invention. In a moment, we will notice how art made that invention feel older than it is. In the late 19th century, an artist painted a gripping scene, a crowd crying out for death, a fighter fallen, another waiting, and thumbs pitched downward like spears. The canvas was big, bright, and traveled in books. People loved its clarity, and movies learned from it. The painting made a tiny Latin phrase into a gesture every child thinks they know. Once an image grabs the stage, words follow it. That is how the thumb story hardened. Knowing this does not spoil old fun scenes. It simply lets you smile at them with a calmer heart. In a moment, we will return to the men in the ring and see how their signals worked. When a match reached its end, when a fighter had had enough, he could raise a finger or two to ask for release. The referee stepped in with his long stick, paused the action, and looked to the sponsor and to the crowd. If the other man had fought well and the day had gone long, mercy was likely. If the asking fighter had behaved poorly, turned back, thrown his weapon, broken a rule, mercy became harder to sell. A tap of the referee's stick gently moved a blade away from a throat. The referee was there to keep rules and to buy time for judgment to speak. The thumb, wherever it pointed, was only one small part of this choreography. In a moment, we will talk about money again, because money shaped mercy as surely as mood did. Training a fighter took food, lodging, and skill. A good pair drew crowds twice. Killing a name everyone knew wasted investment. Sparing him made sense, warmed the audience, and gave the school time to polish him for a better match. Even a hard sponsor liked to be thought generous. Even a crowd, hungry for drama, liked to shout for a favorite's long career. We keep meeting this truth. The Colosseum was not a factory of chaos. It was a theater of control that sold the feeling of risk. Control and cost leaned together like two cypresses in the same wind. In a moment, we will meet a wooden sword that meant more than any thumb. When a fighter had proved himself for years, he might be given a symbolic wooden sword. It meant freedom. He could still choose to fight for money and fame, and some did. But now, as a free person who owned his day, this gift was as theatrical as any sudden gesture. The crowd could see and understand it. It told them the sponsor was generous, the school was proud, and the man had crossed a line that few crossed. A wooden prop can carry more truth than a hand sign, and it leaves better evidence in the ground. Even here, ceremony mattered. In a moment, we will hear the crowd's voice, because letters of the past love to quote their noise. Crowds swayed outcomes. They chanted names, sighed as one, and could shame a sponsor into changing his face. A sponsor listening for weather, in the sound could feel it shift in a handful of breaths. This is why the thumb, whatever its shape, was a weather vane more than a sword. The real deciding winds were trained skill, rules kept by referees, the long view of cost, and a sponsor's wish to be remembered as fair. A crowd craved symbols. A day full of moving parts gave them a tidy one. It still feels tidy now. In a moment, we will fold back a line to our hook and notice how legends like this grow roots in places where echoes are kind. We said on our first night step that the Colosseum invites clean tales. It repeats sound, it swallows and returns footsteps. It wears shadow well. A tiny gesture makes sense here because the building teaches your eye to watch for small changes at the center. But the deeper secret is that many small choices, not one, wrote each ending. Thumb stories linger because they let us pretend to understand a world with a flick. The real understanding is slower and kinder. It is a ledger of routines and people making the best call they can in public. In a moment, we will soften the mood even more by watching someone we have not met yet. The animals whose paths carried seeds, earth, and distant air into these stones. Animals made the arena feel wide as the world. They came from forests, deserts, and far plains, moved by traders who knew more about grass and water than about empires. With them came burrs in fur, seeds in dung, and soil on hooves. Later visitors found odd plants clinging to the walls and counted them with surprise. A quiet botany hides inside the roar. It shows how empire traveled in details that no decree could track. The haunted garden that lives in cracks is not a ghost story at all. It is a living footnote. In a moment, we will follow those paw prints and hoof marks out through the gates and back in again, watching how creatures and plants rewrote the Colosseum into a wild map of everything Rome touched. Before we go, listen once more to the hall where the referees once stood. You can almost hear the tap that asked for calm, not the shout that demanded blood. You can feel how a wooden sword weighed more than a thumb, how a wooden stage weighed more than a painted lake, how a building weighed more than a rumor. This is the rhythm we keep returning to. Gentle correction, clear fact, and curiosity held low and steady. Now let the night carry us to the animals and the seeds they scattered, to the strange garden that still visits the tears, and to the softer secret that plants keep better than people do. Let your eyes rest on the empty rim and breathe in slowly. We have listened to ropes and wheels below, watched a painted sea fade into boards, and learned that a small gesture cannot carry the whole day. Now the night opens a gate for other travelers. Animals walked into this oval from far fields and near forests, and the building kept a trace of them in a way that still surprises people who visit with a botanist's ear. You do not have to love the idea of animals in shows to follow the quiet parts of their story. We will step carefully, with no sharp pictures, and stay with the soft facts of travel, care, and the strange garden they left behind. In a moment, we will follow a paw print back along the roads it came. Creatures arrived along lines of trade that reached farther than a map in your head may stretch. From the north came bears from mountains and shaggy cattle from cold valleys. From the African coast came cats that liked heat, deer with delicate legs, birds that looked as if they were built from wind. From the east came lean wolves and striped cats when luck and cost allowed, and from nearer fields came boar and red deer, animals that knew the climate and the smell of Roman clay. Traders who knew waterholes better than city gates moved these animals across deserts and plains, then onto ships. They were not magicians, they were practical. They knew when to travel, what feed to carry, how to quiet a nervous creature with a hood or a well-timed blanket. Many historians think there were holding yards outside cities where animals rested and ate before being brought in. The city exhaled, the gates opened, and carts rolled. In a moment, we will enter those yards with our thoughts and keep our voice low. Even a practical yard has gentle moments. Keepers learned the temper of each animal, which ones wanted darkness, which needed company, how much water to offer on a cool morning, how to keep food familiar enough to be eaten. Straw that cushioned hooves carried seeds, hay from other climates, crumbled into chaff. Dung held the small, stubborn codes of distant plants. None of this felt like empire. It felt like chores. But it is one reason the oval later sprouted surprises. The walls here warmed in sun and cooled at night, and cracks that looked like scars turned into flower pots for seeds that had traveled in fur and baskets. We will return to that living footnote soon. In a moment, we will walk the last short path from yard to hypogeum and hear a drumbeat in our memory. When the day came, animals moved before people filled the seats. The keepers chose quiet corridors. We have already seen where lifts waited with their patient frames. Now add the sound of hooves muffled by straw, a handler's hum with no tune, the brief touch of a hand to a shoulder. Doors closed in a sequence learned by heart. A cage rose, a trapdoor popped, and above, the wildness unfolded with more care than it looked. Musicians and crowd noise hid the quick noises that made animals jitter. The smell of sand and paint and bodies from the morning's first acts made a new world to sniff. The crew below tried to keep the appearance of risk without letting real chaos walk out. In a moment, we will glance up from that doorway and consider the cost that shaped what kinds of scenes could be afforded. Animals were dear. Catching, transporting, and feeding them were chains of expense that only the richest sponsors could pull tight often. This cost is part of why morning programs were carefully staged with trained keepers wearing the day like a well-practiced cloak. A lion that had learned to move through a gate without flinching was as valuable as a starfighter. A deer that could be guided toward a painted grove on cue was a small miracle of patience. Scarcity and season also shaped the program. Some years saw more birds because ships brought them alive without much trouble. Some seasons leaned on local boar and imported cattle because big cats were few. Audience mood mattered, but coin measured the arc of the day. In a moment, we will let the wall itself speak in leaves. Centuries after the last show, someone with a plant list and unhurried feet walked these stones and counted. The walls had become a patchwork of climates, with sunny corners where a seed could survive a spring, and cooler nooks where northern grasses took root. A 19th century doctor made a small book of what he found, hundreds of species by his eye. Some expected, some foreign to central Italy, and the list changed as stones were cleaned and as city air shifted. Later botanists did the walk again and found a different mix. A reminder that the Colosseum's garden is a living thing, not a museum label. Plants do not ask your permission to haunt a place. They simply grow where the building makes a tiny home for them. In a moment, we will crouch by a crack and watch a root test stone with slow courage. Seeds arrived in many sneaky ways. Straw that lined animal pens left husks in corners. Dung dropped by a frightened creature held little passengers. Feed spilled near the lifts rattled into joints between stones. Later, goats grazed around the ruins, and their coats brought burrs. Birds nested in holes where clamps once sat and dropped seeds from markets and gardens all over the city. Rain loosened dust into soil on ledges. Sun warmed the southern face until a fig thought it was back on a riverbank. And a tough weed that survived deserts decided this wall felt familiar enough. The building became an accidental mountain, with microclimates stacked in rings. Many visitors feel the haunted mood before they know this. When they learn it, the mood softens into fascination. In a moment, we will return to the keepers, and the small kindnesses that rarely make it into stories. A keeper's day was a string of ordinary mercies. A wet cloth over a panting mouth. A pause at a water bucket, kept just out of Hoof's reach to reduce spill. A rope held slack enough, too calm but firm enough to guide. Training leaned on patterns, not pain, because a predictable cue dropped the chance of chaos from likely to rare. It is gentle to remember this, while we admit the other truth. Animals were used for human spectacle. We can carry both, the same way we carried skill and risk in the shows above. Many historians think keepers' knowledge, once learned, moved from generation to generation, not because Rome wrote a manual, but because sons watched fathers and apprentices watched elders. In a moment, we will notice how animal travel changed the city's air even before any show began. When ships unloaded at river quays, straw and feed spilled, birds flew off carts, and foreign dust joined Roman dust. Markets smelled different. For a week, children saw a crane lower a crate and asked too many questions. A city that was already a crossroads grew a little wider without leaving home. The Colosseum distilled that wideness into a single bowl for a morning. Later, when time moved on, the wideness stayed in the walls as plants took hold. The wild garden many people write about is a quiet echo of empire, less boastful, more honest. It says, "The world came here, and it did not all leave." In a moment, we will stray toward a corner of belief, because the hunters and keepers, worlds had their own small rites. A charm tied near a pen might be a colored bead, a shell, a knotted cord. A keeper might murmur a line before opening a gate, not to change fate, but to slow his own breath. A small libation at dawn belonged not only to ships and sails. It belonged to men who walked animals through dark corridors. They knew how quickly luck could turn. Those gestures live in the same family as the sailors we met at the start of our season on the sea. Manners for a dangerous job. If the Colosseum feels haunted, perhaps it is haunted by such habits as much as by sorrow, by many careful hands doing hard work as cleanly as they could. In a moment, we will think about how the arena's echo changed when paws and hooves were gone, but their garden remained. In later centuries, when the oval had no shows, goats grazed on the lower slopes, and people grew vines in nearby lots. The wild garden thinned and thickened with each repair campaign, each clearing ordered by a new official, each year of drought or damp. Visitors wrote about daisies in winter and thistles in summer, about a rogue fig throwing shade over a broken stair, about swallows stitching the sky with their quick arcs. When people say haunted, they often mean full. Plants made the place full again when crowds left. They kept a low conversation going when the city's loudness moved elsewhere. In a moment, we will bend to the stone one more time, and feel a leaf edge brush our knuckle. If you stand close to the wall at night, you can smell a green note under the lime and dust, especially after rain. That smell is a gentle contradiction to every story of cruelty told here. It does not erase those stories. It lays a balm over the surface and reminds you that life returns where it can. The same warmth that once kept a seated crowd comfortable now makes a ledge kind to a weed. The same breeze that cooled a sponsor's face now carries seed fluff from a city park. Stones that echoed a drum now echo a pigeon's wing. Not all hauntings scare. Some simply insist that the past has many layers, and plants know how to read them. In a moment, we will turn to the nearer past and follow other forms of life that moved into the Colosseum after shows ended. After the empire's big rhythm broke, people made homes in the arches. Workshops set up where sellers once shouted. A small chapel grew in a corner where a rich man used to sit. Stone was stolen, yes, but prayers were given. Lime was burned, but lullabies were sung. The wild garden climbed around laundry lines and over door lintels. The building stopped being only a stadium and became a neighborhood that lasted in fragments for centuries. That second life is another reason the place feels watched at night. Many kinds of living left their marks here. In a moment, we will walk into those centuries and watch masons chip, monks chant, and children play, all inside this same great oval. As the botany of the walls keeps its own soft count beside the tally of voices. Before we go, carry one small, picture a keeper's hand, palm open, offering a calm breath to a nervous animal just before a lift. That hand speaks to the gentler side of the arena, the part that relied on patience and timing rather than clash. The seeds that came with that breath found niches later and kept growing in a city that forgets very little. We return to the question. We opened with why the Colosseum feels haunted and answer it with these quiet things, echoes, ropes, prayers, and leaves. Soon we will let the crowds of later centuries enter, with their hammers and their hymns, and watch the oval turn from theater to town, and from town to memorial, without ever losing the low music of air, moving through arches that let the quiet widen as we step out of the arena's first life and into its second and third. A building this large does not stop like a theater when the curtain falls. It keeps breathing, even if the music changes. When the shows faded and the empire's rhythm loosened, people did not fence off the oval and call it a memory. They moved in. They set up doors in the arches, laid planks across thresholds, and made rooms where crowds once streamed. Night sits well on that idea. You can almost see a lamp at one arch, a basket at another, and a line of laundry lifting in the morning breeze. In a moment, we'll pause with one of those families and hear how a home can grow in stone that was built for noise. A mother stirs a pot near a doorway. A child chases a cat along a corridor that once led to senators' seats. A mason keeps a bench under the curve of a vault and sharpens chisels while the day warms. A goat pulls at weeds growing from cracks, unconcerned with emperors. It is likely that small workshops hammered and mended here, iron fixed, sandals resoled, wine watered and sold cup by cup to passers-by. The Colosseum softened from stadium to neighborhood, from ceremony to errands. Many historians think this everyday life filled the arches for centuries in shifting patterns, more in one era, fewer in another, like tide. In a moment, we'll climb a stair of memory and find a different kind of resident, the praying kind. Inside, the oval chapels appeared. A small room became a small shrine, then a station on a path of meditation. People carried crosses and walked slowly, turning the building into a quiet church, without moving a single seat. A pope in one age declared the place holy to martyr memory, and that decision protected the stones as much as piety did. If a ruin is a loaf left on the table of a hungry city, a shrine is a lid you place over it. Stone thieves think twice when bell and blessing hover. You can still feel the echo of those processions. Solemn steps and low voices do not fade as fast as cheers. In a moment, we'll return to the sound of tools. Because not every visitor came with a prayer. There were years when the oval was a quarry with convenient stairs. Blocks came loose, iron clamps were pried out, and wagons rolled away to become doorframes and palaces elsewhere. People later said this building became another building, and there is some truth in that. A city that needed to grow found rock, where rock already stood. The result is strange. The Colosseum keeps its shape, while parts of it live inside churches, mansions, and walls across Rome. That movement of stone adds to the haunted sense. You do not only stand inside one ruin at night, you stand among many buildings' bones at once. In a moment, we'll slide along the timeline again and meet a family that treated the oval like a fortress. After the shows but before strict rules, one powerful clan made the arena part of its defenses. They braced archers, blocked passages, and turned graceful curves into walls with purpose. From certain angles the place looked less like a crowd bowl and more like a stronghold. It is possible that banners hung where awnings once stretched. Then fortunes changed, as they do, and the fortress mood faded. But the idea left its mark. The same doors that calmed crowds could also confuse enemies. You can feel how adaptable the plan is under your feet. A building designed for movement became, for a time, a building designed to halt it. In a moment, we'll return to the small worlds under each arch, because that is where the city really lived. Think of a winter evening. Smoke curls from a brazier. A woman mends a cloak with thick thread. A boy carries a jug to a nearby fountain and brings it back with both hands, proud not to spill. Someone sings. In spring, someone plants beans in a wooden box on a ledge that steals sun for 5 hours a day. The wild garden we counted earlier does not only belong to animals and seeds, it belongs to these hands too. Herbs grow where a brick loosens. Cats sleep where senators once argued. The building learns to hold small families with the same patience it once held, a city of strangers. In a moment, we'll notice how disaster visited and how the oval answered. Earth shook more than once. Arches cracked, stones shifted, and blocks fell. Each tremor changed the outline a little, as if a careful editor were removing sentences from an old page. After such days, some arches were patched, some were abandoned, some were taken down on purpose to be safe. The wounded look most visitors loved the romantic ruin, open to sky and filled with birds, much to those hours. The haunted field grows in the gaps, in the places where a curve stops suddenly and a shadow begins. Many historians think that after one heavy shaking, the decision to use the place as a stone mine hardened, because patching everything would have cost more than the city could pay. In a moment, we'll stand with a traveler from a later century, and hear what they heard. On the Grand Tour, when young visitors from far away came to learn with their feet, the Colosseum became a set piece for longing. They wrote about moonlight on broken tiers, about weeds that looked like little forests, about standing alone where a world had shouted. They did not see a neighborhood. They saw a stage of time. Painters set easels where hawkers once stood, and turned rough stone into soft color. In their hands the oval became a gentle wound. beautiful because the edges were not clean. Their words and pictures fed the legend you can still feel at night. A place both proud and sad, both lived in and left. In a moment, we'll listen to the city itself, which had its own plans and did not always care about size. City rulers tried more than once to decide what the Colosseum should be. Sometimes they favored prayer and set up crosses and processions with official care. Sometimes they favored order and cleared houses from the archers, moving families and sweeping out workshops to make the ruin pure. Sometimes they favored building and allowed stone to roll away for new projects that needed old strength. In one era of fast slogans, the ruin became a backdrop for ceremonies about power and past glory. We do not need to argue here. We can simply notice that this oval wore many costumes after its first roll, and each costume left threads behind. Those threads are part of the haunted feeling too, a crowded attic of time, as if you opened a trunk and found festival clothes, children's shoes, monks' robes, and a mason's hammer all jumbled together. In a moment, we'll step back toward the people who saved more than they took. Conservation is a quiet word for a lot of patience. In the 19th and 20th centuries, crews propped arches, rebuilt parts of the outer ring to stop further fall, and scraped vegetation where roots threatened to pry stones apart. They added rails so visitors would lean safely, not onto old edges, and they mapped every crack habit could miss. None of this work shines. All of it keeps the night roomy. For us, many historians think the modern idea of historic monument coalesced here as much as anywhere. Not a temple to be remade, not a quarry to be emptied, not a home to be subdivided, but a memory to be cared for in place. In a moment, we'll listen for the sounds that returned when the houses left. Wind came back first, learning again how to run through open corridors without hitting laundry lines. Birds reclaimed niches and wrote their little letter shapes across dusk. Footsteps changed, from a child's daily run to a visitor's slow walk. Guides told stories in many languages, and the oval became a classroom where the lesson is never finished. Sometimes at night, art filled the space, again quiet concerts or readings that used the echo with respect. The building accepts this. It was made for voices. It only asks that the voices remember they are guests. In a moment, we'll follow a small roomer down an arch and smile at how stories settle when rooms are empty. Urban legends found a home the way swallows find a ledge. People said that under the sand there are still rooms sealed with treasure, that a secret tunnel runs to a palace, that if you stand in one arch and whisper a name, the name will return with an answer. The building does not mind such talk. It has space for it, and many simple truths sound like legends anyway. Water did run under the seats in planned ways. There were tunnels to nearby service buildings, and whispers do return because the curve is kind. Legends are the city's way of talking about maintenance without using the word. In a moment, we'll carry a softer noise into the picture, one the night already knows by heart. At dusk, starlings gather over the oval in clouds that twist, and below they ride the evening air and settle by the thousands on ledges and cornices, then lift as if a hand were throwing a scarf. Their murmur is not spooky, it is cozy, like rain on a roof. Some say the birds remember routes older than maps. Some say they like the heat the stone still keeps. Whatever the reason, their show is gentler than any program the Oval ever sold, and it makes the ruin feel less alone. You will hear them if you come late. In a moment, we'll step to the edge of the present and notice how tours and lights and new repairs become another layer, not an end. Today, the Colosseum hosts lines at morning and quiet at midnight. Engineers test stone with devices that listen for tiny movements. Specialists brush mortar from the 19th century and discuss whether to keep it or replace it. Guides learn new ways to explain old puzzles without shouting. Visitors stand under arches and take pictures that become family legends. The building keeps saying yes to this. It has said yes to so much. The haunted mood, if we still want that word, is simply fullness. Quarry and chapel, fortress and housing block, classroom and concert hall. Many homes live here at once. In a moment, we'll bring all these rooms to a single night scene and open the door to our last chapter. Picture the Oval now with a small tour moving through, each person lit by a gentle lamp. A guide pauses on a platform where a family once ate, where a monk once sang, where a mason once chipped, where a goat once pulled a weed, where a painter once sighed, where a restorer once signed a report, where a child in our time once whispered, "Wow." That is the attic we spoke of. Not dusty, but busy. Not frightening, but full. We return to the question we opened with: why the place feels awake when Rome sleeps, and answer it with a list of lives more than with a list of ghosts. In a moment, we'll step into modern nights themselves, where storytellers test the echo, where the city's traffic becomes a low tide at the doors, and where you may hear the softest secret of all, that engineering, propaganda, and memory, when layered kindly, can sound like a lullaby. Let the city thin to a hush, and let the oval become a slow lantern again. Traffic turns into a low tide you barely notice. The air cools and carries the smell of wet stone if sprinklers ran in nearby gardens. A small group with soft lights drifts along the lower ring, and their guide lowers the voice, as if the building itself were a sleeping child. You hear shoes on old steps, a laugh that stays kind, and the little gasp that comes when someone looks up and finally understands how big the sky feels over this place at night. We have walked through work, ritual, rumor, and plants. Now we stand in the present and listen for how those layers sing together. In a moment, we will fall in step with the group and let their path be ours. A modern tour is a careful choreography, not so different from an old program if you look sideways. There is an opening history in broad strokes, a note about emperors and money, a gesture toward the lake rumor that we now know how to measure against drains and timbers. Then a turn down a corridor where echo becomes teacher and a lamp shows the bite marks where clamps once sat. Guides carry a bag of small truths and a pocket of maybes, and they keep the two apart with respect. Good ones do not hurry, hush. They let silence do what silence does best. Outline what is already in the room. In a moment, we will pause with them where the floor used to be, and let a whisper test the curve. Whispers here do not rush away. They try on different seats and return dressed in soft versions of themselves. The guide asks for one sound, perhaps a name, and you hear it come back as if the building liked it. Old acoustics have not retired. They simply host a gentler music. A bat writes one quick line across the open center and is gone by the time anyone points. Someone asks about the thumb and smiles when the answer is slower than a gesture and more human than a painting. The group breathes easier when myths keep their charm but give up their throne. In a moment, we will step to the railing that looks into the understage and let a small lamp find the edges of old shafts. Light falls down the stone into squares and rectangles like wells. The story of lifts and trapdoors fits into those shapes with satisfying ease now that you know it. It is almost cozy to imagine the wheelwalkers counting their steps and the latch handler waiting for the cue. The visitor wonders if any of that machinery survives. The guide explains that wood does not love centuries, and that impressions in stone are often the best record. The group nods. Old work seems close again, not because ghosts move, but because purpose moves. When you see where effort once lived, effort reappears. In a moment, we will turn back to the seats and let the present sit beside the past without jealousy dot up on the broken tiers. Phones glow, and for a second the place becomes a far constellation. People take pictures and write small notes to send to friends an ocean away. A rare event might bring music to the center, something low. Maybe strings, maybe a single voice, and the sound gathers the way it did when drums and flutes kept time, but softer, with fewer sharp edges. The building says yes to this too. If it was made for audiences, it only asks that the hour ends the way it began, with care. The engineer who watches the stones likes music that does not shake dust. The building likes songs that match its breath. In a moment, we will step outside the official path and into the city's habit of telling little stories that stick. Urban legends do not need tickets. They ride on night air from arch to arch. A friend of a friend swears a hidden chamber opened during a repair, and that a stack of coins was found and then hushed up. Someone else swears the moon rises exactly over a certain arch on a certain date, and that lovers who stand there will never quarrel. The shape of the place invites such details. It is full of frames that make the sky look intentional. You do not have to scold these tales. You can set them down beside the real tunnels to service buildings, the real marks where pulleys hung, the real barrels where rain was kept. Let the true and the almost true share a bench without a fight. In a moment, we will look up at a different crowd that gathers without asking for a story. Starlings arrive like scattered pepper and then pour into one moving cloud. They practice the art the arena once sold, shaped from many. The flock folds on itself, ripples, becomes an eel, becomes a shoal, becomes smoke, and then suddenly becomes nothing but 1,000 small birds landing on ledges you thought were too thin to hold even dust. Their murmur is a kindness to the ruin. It fills gaps without claiming them, and it changes every night, so no one calls it routine. Some visitors think this must be a planned show. It is just birds in air making a treaty. In a moment, we will watch a guard lean on a rail and feel how people who work here now carry the place with a quiet pride. A modern caretaker knows where the cold pockets sit at dawn and where tourists will try to climb if a rope is not tied a little tighter. They know which crack is new and which is a scar from a previous century. They can tell you when to come for the best light, and when the city noise will soften enough that you can hear your own footsteps as clearly as the ones in your mind. Their job is not romantic in the brochure sense. It is romantic in the way good maintenance is always romantic. It keeps a promise. We return to our first night's thought. The darkest secrets here are not supernatural. They are systems that learned how to move people and feelings, and propaganda that learned how to live in stone. In a moment, we will name those systems the way you would name friends. Engineering is the first. It holds you without crowding you, turns breath into acoustics, turns arches into gentle traffic lanes, turns wood and rope into wonder. Propaganda is the second. It used the building like a coin stamped with a face and a message. Generosity, control, spectacle, here and now. Memory is the third. It draped later meanings over earlier ones. Martyr shrine, ruin, museum, until the whole became a layered garment that the city still wears easily. When people say haunted, they often mean these three singing together. The song is low, but you can hum it after you leave. In a moment, we will step to the outer ring and listen to the city answer. Scooters pass like bees. A bus breathes at a stoplight. Laughter from a nearby cafe crosses the road and sits for a second on a fallen block. The Colosseum does not ignore this, it folds it in. The Oval has always been a room in the middle of a greater house. When the city sleeps, the room keeps watch, and when the city wakes, the room lets the noise borrow its echo and turn playful instead of harsh. That is another secret that is not dark at all. Big ruins soften big cities. They teach them to walk more slowly for at least one block. In a moment, we will find one last small place to stand and allow the long line of our night to come back to its start. Take the spot where the sand once met the first row of seats. Imagine the awning's shadow moving across faces, the drum counting a rhythm, the lifts waiting for their cue. Replace the drum with your breath and the cue with your own soft curiosity. You know now that the water lake is more painting than plan, that the thumb is more art than law, that the underworld was a workshop, that plants wrote a green commentary, and that later families, monks, masons, and birds all took their turns. The building is awake because people keep giving it uses that do not cancel each other out. It is not a ghost. It is a memory that you can walk through. In a moment, we will let the guide's lamp fade and borrow the moon's lighter hand. The group drifts toward the exit arches. Voices even lower now. A guard swings a gate with a small squeak that the curve decorates as if it were music. Somewhere, a leaf, brave for a wall, moves against lime and makes a scratch you almost hear. Starling's turn is one, and then release the ledge to the air. The Oval holds all of it as calmly as it held crowds long ago. We opened with the word haunted and kept it in our pocket like a charm, turning it now and then. You can keep it if you like, but now it means full, layered, considerate. If you come back in the day, you will find a different brightness in the same places. If you go now to sleep, you will carry a quiet oval with you. In a moment, the city will take the watch, and the building will do what it has learned best. Breathe gently, repeat softly, and keep its secrets in the open where we can see them. Asterisk, we return to the feeling we opened with. That gentle shiver, some call haunted. It is not emptiness trying to scare you. It is fullness asking to be heard slowly. Echoes return because the curves were drawn to hold and release sound. Cool air slides through rings because archers love wind. The dark mouths below are not hungry. They are retired workshops where lifts once kept wonder on time. Seeds carried by animals and people turned cracks to small gardens, making the stone a quiet map of places beyond Rome. Families and monks and masons later filled the arches with warm lives. Birds right there, moving script across dusk. The building is awake because it has never been only one thing. If you listen, you can hear the 3 soft engines humming together even now. Engineering holds your steps and returns your voice. Propaganda smiles from the grand curve, a reminder that power likes a stage. Memory drapes new meanings over old ones and calls the layering home. None of those engines are spooky. They are simply human. They explained why the Colosseum, even while sleeping under the moon, feels like a book someone is still reading aloud in a low voice. Breathe in once, slowly, and feel the air cool your throat. Breathe out, and let the drums, the ropes, the leaves, and the distant scooters fold into one steady tide. You know, now, why the lake rumor sparkles, why the thumb picture persists, why prayers found a home here, and why the understage grid still seems to wait for a cue. The secrets were never hiding. They were working in plain sight. If you like this gentle pace, you can subscribe, and we'll keep walking other old rooms in the same soft way, leaving every light low and every answer honest. For tonight, let Rome keep the watch. The oval will breathe, as it has for ages. Echoes will practice their return and then sleep. A small plant will test a new route against warm lime. Somewhere, a guard will lock a gate and smile at the quiet, and you can let your own eyes close, carrying the calm knowledge that the Colosseum's haunting is only a full heart, beating steadily in the middle of a living city.